Welcome back to On Hue, where we dive deep into the world of BIPOC beauty. I'm Reneé.
And I'm Jess, and today's episode is titled Reclaiming Wellness, the BIPOC Journey to Self-Care.
I'm so excited about this episode. I love all things wellness, self-care. We're actually going to get into those meanings of those words. But like a number of years ago, I think this was in 2020 or 2021, my friend of mine, her name's Nikia Phoenix. So she's a model, but she also started Black Girl Beautiful. I don't know if it's still around, but I do know that she now like is fully into like wellness practices. Mm-hmm. That's fully what her job is now. But her and I wanted to do a big wellness event, virtual, during the pandemic. And it was going to have all the things, everything about self-care for Black and brown girls. And we had, came up with this huge deck. We pitched it to Dove.
What'd they say?
They said, nah. Yeah, it was tears. We had a whole virtual PowerPoint meeting with them.
Yeah, I saw the deck that you sent me, and I thought it was really good.
It was good.
It was really good. I feel like for the time, it was pretty innovative because self-care was barely becoming a buzzword.
Yeah, it was definitely barely becoming a buzzword, especially in the Black and brown communities. But now I'm excited that we have this podcast. We're able to talk about it and really dive deep into it.
And we're going to have a self-care event.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And when you and I were talking about it, it was really nice to see your eyes get all watery.
Yeah. Because
it's truly a full circle moment of you wanting to, I don't want to say get a seat at the table and then being like, no. But then now, like episode 2, and we're talking about our girl Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah.
And we're bringing our own chair and we're paving our own path.
Yeah. We're just going to do
it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that.
It's going to be amazing. So everyone stay tuned for all the details.
On our Instagram, if you don't follow onhue.podcast, make sure that you do via Instagram because all the details are going to be posted there.
Yes. Excited. Okay. So let's talk about self-care, wellness.
I love self-care. I love wellness. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that I realized through this podcast episode and then just like the research was defining the terms that we hear thrown around in the beauty space. Yeah. One of them being wellness and the other being self-care. Mm-hmm. So for me, I have to be so honest. And I was confused on both and how they played together in this space. Mm-hmm. So wellness is the overall state of being healthy and happy, focusing on physical, mental, and emotional well-being.
I like that word, overall.
Overall. Mm-hmm. It's like total life moment. Mm-hmm. And then self-care is a component to wellness. Mm-hmm. And I think in my head,
like a branch.
Yes, in my head, I was putting them both in the same compartment, and self-care and wellness were kind of used interchangeably for me. But realizing that self-care is a component to wellness and it focuses on the personal habits that help maintain balance and health. So you need both to be able to have like a healthy ecosystem within your self-care and wellness practice and routine. Yeah. So I was just really happy to be able to finally understand both. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think it's really interesting that we have been seeing these words in the beauty space buzzing around. Yeah. And I feel like after 2020, everyone just like stamped them on everything. Yeah. Every brand was a self-care brand. Literally. Every brand was a wellness brand. Mm-hmm. Every brand, was like in that space. Yeah. And I think it truly took away the value of the word. Mm-hmm. It started to get watered down. Mm-hmm. And then I don't think we truly understand what those two words mean and how we can integrate them into our own personal life. Yeah.
And also those words just weren't even heard of necessarily until I would agree 2020 is when I remember seeing on Instagram wellness, self-care, holistic, all these.
Oh, the holistic word.
Yeah, the holistic word. Clean beauty, sustainable. Trigger. Now, granted, this was a time, it is actually a bunch of things. And this is like stuff we talked about in our previous episode. But these words that are traditionally used in BIPOC communities, whether it's that word or not, but these practices.
Yeah, the practice.
But during the pandemic, when those words became popular, that was only to what? Monetize off of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was the capitalism said, today's the day that we can monetize off of your cultural practices and identity.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is really cool to see, though, is how we're reclaiming self-care and we're reclaiming wellness as almost like an act of resistance, because I think that as BIPOC individuals, we're still unlearning so much of what wellness and self-care look like to us because of our history, because of the way that, you know, we live as BIPOC communities in America. And then not only that, but because America is made up of so many cultures, so many like immigrant families come to this country, or third generation or second generation born from immigrant parents. And I think it's really cool to be able to see that shift of like you and I reclaiming what self-care and what wellness means and being able to integrate it not only for ourselves as like individuals, but also for our families.
Yeah, a cute story. So my son, he just turned 11 the other day, but for the past couple of years, not in the pandemic, but I think he actually learned these words during the pandemic. But when he was 9 and 10, he would say, well, actually, Ben and I would say, oh, I need a self-care day. Now, when I'm saying I need a self-care day, that means I'm like, goodbye, like fam, love y'all, but I gotta go and have like a full day, meaning like I'm either gonna go get my hair done for the whole day, I'm gonna go get my nails done, or I'm gonna go have a spa day, or I'm gonna go to the movies, or something that I'm like taking care of myself, okay? And so I would say these words like in our household, I need a self-care day, you know, and then Ben would say, I need a self-care day, whatever that means to him. But then now Abel has adopted those into his like vocabulary as well. So for him, you know, I just remember, you know, Mom, I want to do a self-care day. And so I was like, well, what does that look like for you? What do you want me? What do you want to do? And so for him, it's it's so cute. For him, it's taking like a steam shower with like a steam kind of, I forgot what those are called, like a
shower steamer.
Then like putting like scented lotion on that helps him to calm down.
I love that.
It's actually these great products from Shea Moisture actually that he likes to use for that. Then he wants me to slice up cucumbers.
Oh, he knows exactly what he wants.
Yeah, give him a hand massage and like, you know,
he said, I'm going to the spa today.
Literally, mommy is taking me to the spa. Ben will make him like a super nice, like healthy lunch. But these are the things he's telling us. So we're like, okay, well, this is what we'll do this for you. And then he will read, or he'll just like watch something like a movie that he wants to watch, you know, and he'll just spend the day like that. But I love that he's started these practices at such a young age, and like realizing like self-care is just taking care of yourself, you know?
Yeah. I think what's really cool is that he understands what that word means. Yeah. Because I think for me, when I was growing up and, you know, through the research of this and like trying to put my thoughts together, it made me realize how I was doing all of these things when I was little. But it's not like my mom or grandmother were like, hey, what you're doing is self-care. Yeah. So now that I was like connecting all the dots, I was like, wow, like I've been self-caring my whole life.
I've been doing this.
I've been doing that. And I've been self-caring my whole life. But I finally have a word to the things that I was doing. Yeah. And it's really cool that I'm able to teach my kids, you know, the same thing, but now they have a definition as well. Yeah. And what I think is really beautiful too is that as like people of color, like self-care is something that truly is like innate in us. Like it's something that we don't need to adopt traditions. We don't need to adopt customs, none of the stuff, because self-care is such a birthright, and self-care is something that we have been doing for centuries, and it's just really reconnecting back with our roots and seeing like what are these little nuggets that I can pull out and implement like into my life now.
Yeah, and realizing that, like you said, you've already been doing these things. So it's just connecting what you've been doing to that word and then, you know, moving forward. But yeah, it's like these practices are already, just a part of us.
Which, let's talk about that word, practice and routine.
Yeah.
Because I think for me, I've had to really understand the difference between both and how they incorporate into my life. So run it down. What does practice and routine mean?
So routines are something, you know, I was even thinking about it today. It's just something that you do repetitively. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you eat breakfast. That's a routine. That's something you do as a routine every day. You know, it focuses on tasks. While practices are about personal growth, they're about mindfulness. So so routines are something you do every day, like you're not even thinking about it.
It's like muscle memory.
It's muscle memory. But practices, you do have to think about it.
Yeah, it's the mindfulness behind the act that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's so cool to like be able to understand both, because I think like even for our listeners, I want you guys to think about what in your life are you doing that's a practice versus a routine. When I was thinking about SBJ Essentials, and I remember talking to someone who was really interested about learning about the brand, and she was like, oh, I love all these routines that SBJ Essentials comes out with. And I corrected her, not in the sense of like, this isn't what we do, but because I understood that we're not creating routines for people. We really wanted to create practices. Like we want it to be a thing where you're mindful about applying your face mask, because I think routines also can become so mundane and so boring and so like I have to do this one thing versus I want to do this one thing, right? And I think that's where like self-care becomes so stressful for so many people, is because they feel like they have to self-care or they have to do their mask or they have to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, when you think about it from a sense of mindfulness and a sense of like, okay, this is my practice, because having a practice allows me to fill my cup in so many ways that make me feel good about what I'm doing versus it being a task.
So speaking of self-care, let's get into the key pillars of self-care.
Yes, let's do that, because I feel like since 2020, self-care took on a definition of it just being related to skincare.
Yes.
Like self-care equals skincare. But let's redo the math, girls, because self-care does not equal skincare. There's actually 6 pillars to self-care, and they are...
Okay, first one, physical self-care, which obviously we know. Let's think about phys ed. You know,
oh my God, I hated that class. I was like, you're telling me I have to sweat right now? It's first period.
Exactly. So yes, exercising, eating well, and then my favorite thing, well, besides eating well.
I was about to say.
But, okay, eating well is my first favorite thing of physical self-care, but my second is sleep. Okay. Then emotional self-care. That's going to be stress management, mindfulness, and therapy. And then mental self-care is reading, learning, and being creative.
I don't know if I like the mental. No, I love all of these. We'll get into the next 3 in a little bit, but I did want to talk about and highlight some BIPOC wellness like advocates that I feel are doing really amazing things in the community. I think like Tiffany's one of them, and you introduced me to her, and I just really love what she's doing like within the meditation breath work space. I think that's really beautiful, because I do think there is a difference being able to take care of your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health with a practitioner that looks like you.
Yeah. And this is Tiffany Leonardo. She is a amazing yoga teacher, sound bath instructor. Like, she does all the things. She's Dominican, Latina. When I first met her, because literally we don't see people that look like us teaching these kinds of things in a space. So
I was gonna say, we don't see people that look like us teaching the practices that the Western world has adopted from us.
Yes.
It's like they took it and then they do it, but then we're not a part of it. No. But it came from us to begin with. Yeah. And, you know, yoga is an East Asian practice. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, how many of my East Asian girls do I actually see facilitating the practice that belongs to them? Yeah. Not very many. Closest sometimes that we can get is, you know, someone within the BIPOC community teaching a class, but that's already creating such a safe space that, and just like the feeling, the intentionality behind the classes to me is just so different. Yeah. Even I was going to mention, like you said, we hardly see BIPOC people teaching the practices that have been adopted by the Western culture. Like for me, even going to a spa, it's very rare that there's a person of color there. Yeah. But then now, as far as like me going to get like a facial and stuff like that, I'm very intentional about, well, I need to have it be a Black girl. Because even going, you know, to the doctor, all these things to take care of my whole that one being, is like, that one is really, really deep. So not to give you guys too much TMI, but when I was pregnant and I was on the hunt for, you know, the person that was going to deliver my baby, my gyno, whatever, the amount of phone calls I had to make to different offices to ask if they had a BIPOC woman. Yeah. And I will never forget that one office said, "What is BIPOC?" Yeah. And I was like, okay, thank you very much for your time. I am going to assume you do not have anyone in your office. Just assuming. It's BIPOC. But yeah, it's just like, it's really beautiful to see these people in these spaces. I mean, I think for emotional self-care, there's a company called Fully Bloom by Destiny Gale, and she focuses on journaling for emotional clarity. And her brand is so beautiful, and you can see just like the passion in what she does. And again, having it led by a person of color, I think like the interchange in energy and the interchange in like experiences does matter when it comes to you being vulnerable and like venting your deepest, darkest secrets onto paper, because I do think that there is something beautiful that happens when the person that's leading the class understands some of the struggles that you have been through. Yeah. Not only getting up to speed with self-care, because self-care is still so new to us in the sense of like practicing it. Not that it hasn't been part of our culture since forever, but it's new to us because we're re-adopting it. We're reinserting self-care practices within our own life, right? I was going to say with the journaling, one of the things, I don't know if you remember with Abel and Ian, is Ben had them practicing journaling. That was so nice. With, you know, they have to write out stuff for the week of how they want to, what goals and what things, how they're feeling throughout the week to go towards their basketball game. Yeah. And he's done that for a number of seasons now. And that, you know, as far as like sports, that's a huge thing, you know, is like journaling and clearing the mental, you know, so that you can prepare yourself for the game. You can be like, you know, not stuck in like a mental block, you know? Yeah. So I feel like if our community has been looking for different ways to self-care within these 3 pillars, I definitely recommend for them to check out. Tiffany will leave her Instagram you know, on the screen somewhere. And then also Fully Bloomed, I think, is a really another really beautiful one. And then we have Gracie who does somatic tools for grief and bilingual breathwork. So we'll leave all her info on the screen too. Yeah. But diving into pillar 4, 5, and 6, we have social self-care, which awkward butterfly over here, spiritual self-care, and then environmental self-care. So social is maintaining relationships and community. I love this one, and I'm excited to talk about that in a bit. Yeah. Spiritual, of course, is meditation, prayer, or reflection. And then environmental self-care is enhancing your living space. I'm a Taurus. I fully believe in like my zodiac placement and the things that make me me. And I think like social, spiritual, and environmental are like 3 things that I really thrive on, from making sure that my house looks nice and aesthetic. Like things have to be visually like appealing and pleasing. And then internally I'm like, wow, this is really nice. Like I feel really happy being in this environment. Spiritual self-care, I think for me has been, if not one of the most important pillars of self-care.
Yeah.
Spiritually, I feel like as long as my faith is intact, things can be falling apart. And I'm like, okay, I still have the one thing, which is my love for God and my spirituality, and knowing that whatever crazy time I'm going through, my spirit is still intact and my faith is like there. Now, I'm not going to say that I don't question it sometimes. I'm like, God, are you there? But then he'd be answering and I'm like, okay, we good, you're there.
One of the things with spiritual self-care, I think within all of these BIPOC communities, everyone, you know,
spiritual
practices meditation, prayer, reflection. For me, growing up in a Christian household, it was always seeing my grandparents and my parents like praying. Obviously, I go to church all the time. And then even now, just adopting that into my life, like, you know, believing in God, praying, things like that. But it's just become a part of like, you know, the spiritual self-care. It's just a normal, you know, just a normal part of my life now. And it's amazing.
It really, really
is. That's I feel like that's the number one thing. You know?
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think as long as like your cup is full in that sense, you're able to then like, you know, branch off into the other areas. And I think for social self-care, like maintaining relationships and community, what came to mind was just the events that we do for On Hue. Our events are so community focused, and our events are truly here to serve the community that supports us by giving them the accessibility and the resources that they need to be able to self-care, because, you know, you might not realize it, and I sure didn't realize it, but coming to our events is a form of self-care.
Yeah.
It's fueling and filling your social self-care. Right? And I think because our events are so intentional and because they're so like thoughtful, like we put so much thought into what we're presenting to our community, because we know that time is of value. So when people are at our events, we want to make sure that they're getting like the most of their time and the best self-care experience.
Yeah. And it's basically, we're thinking about how we can take care of our community from the beginning to the end. What will make them comfortable, you know, throughout this, you know, the entire event, whatever it is, from eating to icebreakers to the, you know, products they're receiving, just everything.
BIPOC beauty
products. We're taking care of the whole thing. And even I was going to say, as far as like maintaining relationships, I think
hard.
It is hard in a sense, but I also feel like, I think earlier on in my career is like having a heart just for people and realizing like everyone is different. This world wouldn't be as special as it is if everyone was the same. So you have to like realize everyone's different. Let me have a heart for this person and actually get to know them.
Yeah.
But I feel like earlier on, adopting that into my work practices has helped me maintain all these relationships. You know how many relationships I have in this industry. But I feel like that's why, you know.
Yeah.
Like I just meet people where they're at, and I like to talk to people about what they're into, because also I feel like people in our career, people like to tell us everything, you know, they like to share. So let me even get into it even more. But I think that's how I've maintained like good relationships.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I have learned through, you know, just being in a partnership with you, the importance of, and not that I didn't find it important in the past, but I think just the value of maintaining relationships. Because for me, I think because I am the eldest daughter, an immigrant, like so many things, like relationships were not at the forefront, if I'm completely honest. It was like, I think being from a Hispanic family, your family is your core. And my mom would always be like, you don't need friends. And like, that's just how I grew up, right?
Yeah.
But I think moving into my adult life and seeing that the social self-care is so important, and that you do need people to reach out to when you're feeling down or when you're not feeling your best is so important, you know? So I really do appreciate that. And I feel like there's some really great community leaders in the spiritual sense, like Botanica Melo, who's led by Claudia and Neilani Melo. And I've worked with them in the past through SBJ Essentials, and we hosted a really beautiful, like, indigenous practice with like a guided meditation and just some other traditional indigenous practices. And it was just really nice to see that when you show up for your community, it feels so good, which I think is something that as BIPOC individuals, we're still trying to unlearn, is that other people matter, and it's not always fight or flight. Yeah. Because I think that's where, for me personally, the root of not showing up comes from, of that like fight or flight of like, oh my God, like what am I gonna do? You know, it's like me, like what am I gonna do to when it's like, you can slow down, you can self-care, you can show up for your community, and it'll be okay.
Well, let's get into some of these practices. So for me, growing up in a multicultural home, my mom is Black, my dad is white, but it was mostly all the practices and things that I learned as far as quote unquote self-care was through my mom. And those things were about care, connecting, family. For me and my sisters, you know, we definitely didn't know any words about self-care wellness, but we were just like, we got to go get our nails done. We got to go get our hair done every single week. We have to get our hair done, whether that's going to the salon or my sisters and I crammed into our bathroom doing each other's hair.
I'd be like, move, this is my sink.
Right, literally. I was the oldest, so everyone moved. But, you know, but as a child, my mom or my aunt or my cousin, every week, this was Sunday. So this was before I started going to a salon. I started going to a salon when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. But before that...
That's so cute. I can picture you like all little in the chair.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We literally loved it. Loved it. Like, you know, just going and like the atmosphere and like, you know, the women just taking care of your hair and washing it. That's such a self-care practice. Somebody washing your hair, massaging your scalp. When we were younger, one of the weekly things that my mom or my aunt or cousins would do was to grease our scalp. And so this was preparing our hair for either braids or to get pressed or twists. This would carry our style on through the next Sunday. Okay, so it will moisturize our scalp, but it's like she would take a rat tooth comb, part it in the tiniest parts or whatever. And, you know, obviously we would like turn our head, and then she'd be like, turn your head back, you know, which now that's funny, but back then it's like we're trying to watch TV.
I know, but
like,
why wouldn't they just turn you towards the TV?
Having us turn towards watching TV? But that practice of her doing that was like massaging my scalp, and then, you know, then at the end she would like, you know, go like this and then proceed to like either do braids or twists. And then I remember my cousin, after she would do our hair, she would be like, mohair. And like, we loved, because she was like the cool cousin. So we were like, we want Veer to do our hair, you know?
Aww.
Yeah, but that was like an act of like self-care.
Yeah.
You know, and so even today with Abel, he loves to go and get his hair done because he loves the act of like the washing and like the scalp massage, or like mommy washing his hair at home and really getting deep into there. But then for me, every Sunday still, now this isn't with Blue Magic, which is what I used back in the day. I do too. I love the smell of it. I love the smell of it. But today I'm using, it's Camille Rose, and it's the Cocoa Nibs and Honey Ultimate Strength Serum. So I've been using that for a super long time, but I do the same thing. Not with a comb, but just with my fingers, just parting it and oiling my scalp and then massaging it in to prepare my hair for the week. And also with this oil, I was looking at it yesterday to see the ingredients, and 2 of the oils, it's Brahmi and Amla, are Ayurvedic oils, which I also love because I was actually going to get into Ayurvedic skincare back in the day. That was just really amazing to see how those 2 things connected. And I didn't even realize like oh, well, this Black-owned brand also carries these two oils that are from, BIPOC Indian community.
Yeah. And I think that's so cool. I think it's really cool to see how, as BIPOC individuals, we adopt different practices within the BIPOC community. One of the things that I think is really important is to always pay homage to where the tradition is coming from. And you mentioned this earlier this week when we were, talking about our event and how we wanted to open it up, and just kind of like reinforcing that ideology of like, it's okay to learn and, implement these practices into your life. But it's also very, very important to understand where they're coming from and why you're using them and how they have influenced the products that, you use today. Because I think that we've seen it with just Western society of how a lot of the practices are just taken.
Yeah.
They're taken, and there is no real homage paid to where it comes from. We've seen it with yoga. The capitalism behind yoga is insane.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much within beauty products just yet when it comes to, I think, like Latin culture. But drinks. Chai, yerba mate, kombucha. Like, we're seeing I feel like this is like open your eyes, because it'll transcend into the beauty space.
Yeah.
Like, once they start seeing, like, oh, this could be a really cool thing to do. Like, I do feel like it'll transcend into this. We've seen it in the drink space.
Yeah.
Beverage space. But I do feel like even as BIPOC individuals, it is important to pay that homage to whatever the tradition, that you're adopting is.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, but speaking of paying homage to these cultures, these traditional practices, like I was saying, first I got really into herbs and oils when I was in Atlanta. When I was done with school, I started working at this health food store called Sevenanda. Now, actually, that word, I'm thinking like, word.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. That was the light bulb that went off in my head. I was like, okay.
Yes. We'll look more into that, but...
That's a cut, y'all know.
That's a wrap. No, but it was called Sevenanda. This was like one of my first like cool jobs. Okay, so it was a co-op health food store. And they had a huge herb and oils, vitamins, supplement section. And I just was like, I want to learn all about these herbs, oils, and how you can use them for any kind of like healing, or if you're sick or anything like that. Because actually, just side note, I hate taking medicine.
Yeah, same.
Like I will take like Advil or Tylenol, if I have a headache, but I just hate taking antibiotics or anything like that, because I'm like, there's got to be, even just as a young kid, there's got to be other ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so when I started working at this health food store, there was a book that they had there, and then I ended up buying it. It's like the medicinal herbs practices. It's like a big blue book, and they update it every year or every few years.
Do you know who the author of the book was?
We'll post it. I have it. I still have it at home.
So I don't know if it was a BIPOC author or not, but that's kind of what I was saying earlier, because it's so common for literature that talks about indigenous remedies and practices to not be by a indigenous or BIPOC author. I think
I would probably say it wasn't. I don't know for sure, but
because I have a book that is one of the original herbal codices from Mexica culture, and it's not indigenous.
Oh, wow!
But it's very, and this is one of the things like I think I want to bring light to. It's like I think as our listeners learn about these things, and maybe we spark the idea of like, ooh, what's Ayurveda? What's like herbal medicine, what's like herbalism, like all that stuff, is to look at where your sources are coming from. And it's not to discredit if it's not a BIPOC author. It's not to discredit, because I'm sure they've done the research. But I do think that it's really important to go to the source.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's a whole nother flip side of when you go to the source, is it actually accessible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This conversation gets really deep.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, with learning about the herbs and oils, I then got into like skincare. So then eventually I moved out to LA. I went to school for skincare. I hadn't actually even heard about that word, Ayurveda, until obviously the very LA. I moved out here. But I was like so intrigued by those, just using herbs, oils as a part of like skincare practices. Another friend of mine, we both ended up going to school for skincare, and then we were going to open up an Ayurvedic like spa on Robertson. We had like the space and everything. But it ended up not falling through because she was like she was an art curator, and then I was practicing, doing makeup, so it didn't fall through. But today I still like use those practices, even, in my makeup with my clients. So just really quick, Ayurveda, that's the word. Ayur means life, Veda, it's like Vita, means, oh no, what's Vita?
Yeah, there's
Life,
a lot of words,
crossovers.
Yeah, that are crossovers.
So Ayurveda means like the knowledge of life. Interesting. Oh, okay. And
Just decoded.
Just decoded. So that's super interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
And it focuses on the mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah. I'm not too familiar with like the Ayurvedic practice. My mom is like super into it.
Yeah.
So she traveled to India and did like an entire Ayurveda. Like she enjoyed it. She didn't want to come back. But I was like, girl, it's a pandemic. You gotta come back. And did like a whole, workshop with them. And I think that was really cool. But what I think is really special is that within my culture of just being Mexican, herbalism and the earth plays such a big part in the way that we see beauty, and the way that we see wellness, and the way that we see self-care. There's so many practices that we have, from limpias to sobadas to baños to temazcales. So many things that we have that integrate herbal knowledge, like ancestral herbal knowledge, with self-care. It's like a form of self-care.
Yeah.
With that said, I do believe that, and this might be like a hot take, but I do believe that it is really important for BIPOC communities to, how do I put this, to just be more mindful when they share their practices. I think that there's so much value in holding something close that's so ancestral and sharing the knowledge first and foremost with your direct community.
Yeah.
So the direct community that has these practices, I feel, should be the first to know about why this is important, why we incorporate this into our heritage, why it's part of our lineage, how it has helped us heal, et cetera, before teaching it to others. Because I think what then happens is the exploitation of a tradition can happen so fast. Yeah. And I feel like I've seen it within the last 2 years of, when it became really cool to be a Latina. We've seen it, like, it was a wave. Like, it took us by storm. Like, Bad Bunny came out and it was like, whoa, everybody needs to be Latino, And I think through that, we started teaching a lot of, like, how to make traditional food, blah, 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 which I think is really cool. But at the same time, I do believe that your magic, in the sense of, like, your learnings, is not for everybody.
Yeah. One of the things you were mentioning is for the community to learn these practices before teaching them outside. So during the pandemic, I don't know if you remember this brand called Crown Affair? Crown Affair?
Is it the hair care?
Yeah. And so, okay, obviously, I started Color McVary, doing all the research, and I was like, oh, okay, Crown Affair. Now, we know no other culture besides the black community says crown for hair.
Yeah.
I added them to the guide. I didn't even look because I was
you were like, done deal.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is a black owned brand. Like Crown, yes, okay. They had the wide tooth comb. They just had all these kinds of things that the black community uses. the lingo, everything. And then literally a couple years later, I went to an event.
My face is like shivering.
I went to an event and it was like all these different brands there, but they were there. And I was with the PR person and I was like, ooh, it was a Black girl. I was with her. And I was like, ooh, I love that you guys are carrying this Black owned brand. And she was like, wait, Crown Affair is a Black owned brand? And I was like, wait. And we looked it up there and it is not. And then her and I were both like, wait. First of all, how did she not know? Second of all, how did I not know? It's like in my guide. But that's the same thing, like, you know, somebody adopting these practices, the words, the lingo, the tools, the identity, you know? Like that was a real, you know, I definitely deleted them off of the thing. Like, I was just like,
I haven't seen, so with Latin culture, and I could be wrong, and if anyone's listening and you're like, oh, I've seen it, please like leave a comment and let us know what that looks like. I haven't seen it too much with beauty. I think I've seen it more maybe with ingredients. Like I feel like they haven't, you know, blatantly been like, oh, una limpia or something like that, you know? But I do feel like I have seen it within the ingredients, which is also like a little triggering. But when I was pregnant and I was, you know, looking for the whole, like, just doing some research, I came across a brand named Leche. Leche means milk.
Wait, what was the brand?
And it was like powdered milk. I think like they turn.
Oh yes.
Like they something, and I was like, you know. So it's like I get it, but I actually don't.
Well, actually, I don't get it. Why don't you just? Well, I guess you can't call it milk because there's the makeup line milk. There's the food company milk.
I know, but you know, like
still,
let's dig deep. Let's
we have it called milk.
Oh, imagine milk with the accent. But with sharing this, you know, holistic approach between Indigenous and Hispanic traditions, I think it's just really important to emphasize the connection that it has between the mind, body, and like spirit all in all. I think like our practices are very rooted in that. There's so many amazing healers within our community. Nancy from Ilumina Tu Alma is like one of my favorites. I feel like she takes her practice, like when I see her, I'm like, that's a practice. Like that's not a routine. Like it's her way of living. She does like limpias, she does platicas, which are like heart-to-heart conversations. She does like candle making workshops. She does a lot of like different workshops, but she's the embodiment of like a practice. Like she truly takes the time and the intention to what it is that she's putting out in the world, and I really love that.
So, like growing up, what were some of the things you did that were rituals, practices, and then how did that like have you start SBJ?
So I didn't know I was self-caring, like at all. Like I would see my grandma do these things, like make an oatmeal honey mask, put her lipstick on, do her hair, do her nails, put perfume on.
I remember you said like when we were at
the beauty supply, the garlic nail polish. My mom didn't self-care as much. Now that I am fully recalling, she did it, and now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, she was just a girl. But I love that she self-cares to the max. But for me, like I said, I didn't know these things, but I was experiencing them. Like when my grandma would braid my hair with like ribbons, when my grandma would like do my mask, when you know we would brush our hair or like take baños or things like that. But it wasn't until adulthood, when the pandemic hit, that I was like, I've been self-caring my whole life. There just wasn't a word that was associated with it.
And were you thinking like, what were these things that I did that like I remember taking care of myself or made me calm or like
I think for me it was the feeling of love. Like what were these things that ignited self-love within me? Because you said that you loved going to the beauty salon. I hated it. I hated it. I would look in the mirror and I would just be like, no, this style is not cute. Like, I think I was just so self-conscious. So seeing that difference in experience is really nice too, because I'm like, okay, I'm uncovering so many things where now I understand why I didn't like going to the salon. It was because of that self-reflection, the image of like everything that was conditioned from my family, et cetera, of not feeling comfortable with looking different or, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, fast forwarding to 2020 when I came out with SBJ Essentials, I did really want to infuse the brand not only with ingredients that are beloved in Latin America, which is so important to me because, again, we are people of the earth. We have extensive herbal knowledge, but also I wanted it to embody and radiate just that self-love that my grandma instilled in me through the things that she did. So our debut product, which was Rosa Clean Mask, pays homage to her, our herbal ancestral knowledge, and then just that self-care practice. So it's really nice to see that we now have brands that are here to support us through our self-care practices that are actually a reflection of us, just like you have found the hair oil brand, which was called what?
Camille Rose.
Camille Rose. And then you have SBJ Essentials, and then you have brands like Brujita, who's also a skincare brand that's really great. And then yesterday, I went to my friend's shop, Be Nice, Have Fun, and I was drawn to a brand called Temazcal. And Temazcal is Nahuatl for Temazcali, which is a, like, I guess you could say modern day sweat lodge. And they carry bath products. And I used one yesterday, and I was just like, it was so nice. They're based out of Texas. And it was just so nice. And I was just like, wow, a part of my culture, like in my house, in the United States. Like, it was just so beautiful to see that, because I think accessibility to products is still so lacking.
And on that, I was doing research on Ayurvedic or Indian-owned brands, and Michelle Ranavat, who we actually got to hear her speak at a summit. She's so cute, so cool, so personable. You know, I actually messaged her afterwards, and she messaged me right back. Just like super sweet. But I saw that she was the first Southeast Asian person to have her brand Ranavat carried at Sephora. And yay.
We love like it, major congratulations, balloons, confetti, all the things flying out.
Yeah, but it's just like, wow. The first is awesome. That's great to have on like your quote unquote resume. But also it's just like, why are there just not, even yesterday when I was looking up brands, there actually aren't that many.
I mean, you know, Reneé, I think you referred me to a retailer, right? And the email that I got back after submitting was the category was full. So then I had a conversation with a friend. And I think my question is, what category? What category? Is it the skincare category? Or is it the BIPOC category?
Right. And even on that note, another person who's like works with that particular retailer, a few of these different retailers, you know, I was like, oh, my friend has an amazing clean beauty brand. And first of all, I asked you, I remember we were at practice, and I was like, and I was like, is your brand clean? And like, you looked at me like, you said I make it at home and use all clean ingredients. So then I told that person, but they were like, oh, but is it up to, you know, they may think it's clean, but is it up to, you know, this retailer's standard? Right,
which I think is really important to define what clean beauty actually means, right? Because by definition, what was the definition we got? It was like, clean beauty is...
It's safe. It's non-toxic.
Safe and non-toxic. Right? And then we look at that through the different countries, which USA versus the EU is like, I don't even know if we're considered like clean beauty at that point. Because most of our ingredients, they can't even have over there. And then we dig deeper within the US to the retailers, and every retailer has their own guidelines of what that looks like. it's like Whole Foods has theirs, Credo has theirs, Detox has theirs,
Cat Beauty,
Sephora, Ulta, to be able to fall into the clean beauty category, right?
So there must not actually
I don't think there is
not
one thing where it's like, so according to the FDA, this is clean beauty, right? So I feel like every department store has their own categories of what that means.
Interesting.
And that's why they're able to,
add in stuff or take out stuff just according to what they personally think
of clean beauty. So should we set the BIPOC clean beauty standard?
Yeah. That's actually really interesting though.
But I think that's like such a great conversation to even have at home, is what clean beauty means to you, taking into account that BIPOC people have been using clean beauty since we were people on this planet.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it gets any cleaner than going to the root of what clean beauty means.
Right. And then people could say, oh, but it's not sustainable, but it's actually pretty much the same. It's organic, free of harsh chemicals.
Right.
It's just another word of saying clean beauty, but you're getting it from
the sustainability is like the source of where it's being derived from, or how it's being brought into fruition from raw material to physical product.
Yeah. So who would say is sustainable beauty better than clean beauty, or is it
right?
But then within the BIPOC community, it's when I was looking at color, when I was starting Color Mayberry back in the day, that was also another thing where I was just I felt so proud, because I was so many of these brands are straight up clean beauty.
Without trying to be clean beauty.
Without trying, they're just
because we're just tapping into our cultural heritage and experience, but we're not highlighted as such, nor celebrated as such.
No, because they don't meet whichever store's standards, whatever that means, but every single store is different, so it's actually
it's backwards.
It's backwards.
Yeah. It's backwards. No, that's really interesting. And I think that as beauty experts in this field, and you and I being in the industry for over 30 years combined, being able to see how self-care has transcended from our personal lives into our working lives, right? Because I feel like our body is our biggest tool.
Yeah.
Aside from our brushes, that back muscle has to be giving, because
that core has to be engaged.
Yes, engaged at all times.
Yeah,
so it's not. So taking care of ourselves is something that is also so important. So for all of our, makeup artists, all of our estheticians, all of our energy workers, all of our anyone who has to use their body as an instrument to be able to provide a service, we just want to remind you that it's so important to self-care, and it's so important to take the time to really pour back into yourself through any of the 6 pillars, because we got to remember that self-care is not just skincare. Self-care is the whole thing of feeling and looking good, from your spiritual life to your financial life to your social life to your mental health to all of that. And I feel like there's still so many untapped topics that we kind of just dusted the surface, but I feel like mental health is a big one within BIPOC communities. There's so much stigma.
Yeah, there's so much stigma, especially, I can't speak for the other communities, but within the Black community, it's definitely not talked about.
Yeah.
Or it's it's actually frowned upon. I think when I was growing up, that was never, ever, ever, ever talked about in the Black community, ever. I never heard mental health, never heard those words. Actually, until I moved to LA in 2000.
Me too.
And that was probably in 2004 or 5, people going to therapy or taking up, mental health leave, any of these things. I never heard about that stuff.
Yeah.
Because in the Black community, it's just and now, of course, prayer and all those things work spiritually, but you also need to take care of mind, your mental. So
Yeah.
you do need to go. If you need to go to therapy, you do need to go. You need to take care of your mental health, you know?
Yeah. And I think within the like Hispanic community, I mean, if you guys are on TikTok, you've seen all the like super funny but not funny videos of like role playing where like the son is playing the dad and talking about mental health and how it's like super traumatic and like, oh, you're just being lazy, get up and go to school.
Right, yeah.
But it's like, no, I'm actually kind of sick.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually really sick. So I think it's just really beautiful that we're having these conversations. And while we're not diving as deep into each specific segment, that we're leaving you with the names so that you can dive deeper on your own too. If there was one category where you were like, ooh, I'm kind of lacking in my spirituality for self-care, or you know what, I've been thinking about my mental health a lot lately, or you know, I feel like my self-care practice when it comes to skincare is great, but I would like it to be
from, why am I doing all this for my client and not doing it on myself?
And also turning it from a routine to a practice. So I feel like we're leaving you with a lot of food for thought for you to be able to take the research upon yourself too. Because one of the things that I noticed too is like with BIPOC beauty and BIPOC traditions and, you know, self-care practices, they're also intertwined. You know, like the mascales, I feel like are very similar to like the Korean bath homes. And when we were talking about paying homage to them, also doing the research before taking on the traditions to understand the etiquette that goes behind each thing. Because I have experience going to Korean bath homes and bath houses and just people acting crazy. And I'm like, this is why it's so important to do the research. If you're going to step into a space that's not necessarily your own and you're adopting it,
go in there and appreciate it and learn about, you know, why these practices are important to that culture.
And the etiquette.
And the etiquette,
know the
of course.
etiquette. You know, because I would hate to go somewhere and be acting a fool and then be like, you know, out of here. So the etiquette is just so important.
I was going to go back to mental health yesterday while I was on set. You know, it was a lot of us gals there. It was a huge BIPOC set. Loved that. As BIPOC girl, you know, we're all there. We're hired, and we're all trying to just like do our best and work super hard and do the most and like doing this and that and, you know, doing too much, like in a sense of like, not like y'all doing too much, but in like a set, like we're really like, calm down. Like we're here, we're in this space, they hired us, they love us, do our job. We don't have to do too much, we don't have to do too little, we're here, you know?
You're just enough.
We're just enough, and like, you know, some of us were not eating, you know, because you're just like, oh, I gotta get this person done, or I need to stay on set. No. And then, you know, then a couple of us girls were talking and, you know, talking about like a makeup artist who's like a department head and just how she actually needed to, so we were talking about she actually needed to step away to take care of her mental health, okay?
Big applause to that.
Exactly, but when we were talking about it on set, it was almost like a negative thing, you know, but this is how it is in the Black community, you know.
I think just BIPOC community, we're taught to work so hard.
And
like,
it's like
no days off mentality.
No days
it's like,
off.
I need a day off, and I was talking about this with my mom yesterday when she was saying how she didn't even take maternity leave. I was like, could not be me.
8 months.
Could not be me.
But no, I was inwardly, I was like, well, that's good that she did that, because we need to take care of our mental health. Or we can't be our best selves. Even if we just working nonstop, not eating, not even socializing, you know, while you're on set. All these things just brings your person down.
And I'll never forget the moment that, you know, when you hop in the airplane and they're like, please put on your mask before assisting others. And I would look at my child sitting next to me and I'm like, they got me messed up. I'm gonna put his mask on first, then I'm gonna put my mask on. Years later, I was like, how can I possibly put his mask on if I can't breathe? How can I possibly help him if I can't help myself? When I realized that and that light bulb went off and it clicked,
That I your mask second.
You gotta wait. And it clicked, and I was like, I have to put my mask on first.
Yeah.
So that I can better assist you. It made me think about my career and just my day-to-day routine so differently, where it's like, no, I gotta be good so that we can all be good. Yeah. Because if I'm not okay, how can I possibly give the best version of myself doing makeup when we become a therapist, when we become bestie? We take on like 30 roles as a makeup artist, right? Makeup and hair, all of that. Any service industry, truly. But how can we be the best version of ourselves and truly serve how we know we can when we're not serving ourselves?
Yeah, if we're not taking care of ourselves fully, then something when we're taking care of others is going to be lacking.
Yes.
You know,
I mean, you have the breakdowns.
Yeah, you have the mental breakdowns. I can't do this anymore. This is too much. Like, that's what happens. Yeah. But I think if we get into these practices, even in our career, of like putting ourselves first so that we can be the best version of ourselves. For me, I really try to get either a facial every month or a massage every month, you know? And I started doing that after we were cleared from the pandemic, but really just like,
not your mid-pandy.
Yeah, you couldn't go. So then after, it's like, okay, well, I'm here for it. But it helps me. I mean, that's just a part of self-care. I'm helping myself, taking care of myself, putting myself first before I put, my clients first. There's definitely these, and when you put your clients first before putting yourself first, you're like, what am I doing? Yeah. It's so draining. Yeah. And it's just not even worth it. And that leads to like having a mental breakdown or leaving your career because it's like you're, serving people but not, helping yourself. All these things will happen if you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah. And I guess before we wrap it up, I think it's important for our listeners to know that self-care, while for you and I could be like getting a massage and literally having a whole day because we love it so much, doesn't have to be that expensive. And it doesn't have to be something that makes you feel stressed. Yeah. It can be something like going outside and taking a walk for 5 minutes. It can be something like drinking water. Your body needs water. It can be something like eating, which I learned with you because I could go a whole day and then by the end I'd be grumpy because I didn't eat anything. Yeah. Eating. It could be something like, this sounds corny, I don't care, but it works for me, is like giving yourself a big hug. Like truly thanking yourself for waking up, for getting through your tasks, for having a good attitude, for trying your best. And it all truly does start with that sense of like self-love, because self-love means that you feel that you are worthy of these things. And that's one of the things that I really want to instill back into my community, not only through SBJ, but through this podcast, is that you're worthy of self-care. You're worthy of taking 5, 10, 15, 20, a whole day if you want, to make sure that you're good. Yeah, even taking yourself to the movies, praying, having some quality time with the Lord, all those things like totally help, and they don't cost anything. I guess going to the movies, so you don't have to go to the movies. You could pop it on Netflix or Hulu or just whatever kind of like, just brings you back to yourself, and you're doing this thing that's helping you to grow as a better person. You're taking care of yourself. So whatever these things, simple things. I love the water thing. Yeah. I don't drink, I mean, I'll drink it like maybe once a day, and then like by the end of the week, you're just like, I need to be, and I just sit at the sink and I'm just drinking water and like looking out at my trees in the, on the side, and I'm just like, but that is like taking care of them. I'm just hydrating, looking at nature, doesn't cost anything, Yeah, so I think that whether you're a makeup artist, a beauty lover, or someone exploring self-care at any stage of your life, there's so much to embrace, not only in like the traditions that we grew up with, but the ones that you're adopting. And I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways is always honoring where these traditions are coming from, making sure that we practice the etiquette when we're entering these spaces. And remembering that as BIPOC individuals, we have the self-care rituals and practices and herbal knowledge that everyone else craves.
Yeah.
So never forget that. And, you know, one of the beautiful things about self-care is that you're able to really dive deep and connect back with that cultural, that part of your culture.
I think one of the other things I'm going to say is, just the simple acts of self-care will go a long way. You don't have to spend money.
But support your community.
But, you know, there's
if
also
you are
community and doing research on BIPOC brands that are within the wellness space. You know, even if people are in Atlanta listening to this, look up Nikia Phoenix. She's doing amazing things in the wellness space. Beautiful person, like, just love her so much. And also doing research on brands, products, practices. Like for me, I love to learn about all these new cultures and practices, you know, and then maybe bringing those into, you know, my work or into my personal life. Before I'm just like, oh, let me just, you know, not know anything about this product. And, you know, like when you talked about Temesco, like now I'm like, okay, I got to do research on that so I can like go support that brand.
Yeah.
And then also in the back of my head, I was like, that's what I was talking about. See, the you know, the Hispanic culture needs to have a place where we can go and learn about these practices and products and things like that.
Yeah, not the On Hue spa.
Not the On Hue spa in Joshua.
That's my favorite clip.
Me too.
We love Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed this segment talking all about wellness and self-care. Don't forget that if you need additional resources, you can always head to our Instagram, onhue.podcast. Also, don't forget that you can leave us a note on our website. And if you love the conversations that you're hearing and you want to support us, be sure to head over to onhuepodcast.com and take our pledge where you can donate any amount that will help us better serve you and help us continue to make the content that you guys are looking forward to.
And then also, if you guys, our listeners, do any self-care practices that you want to introduce to us, drop us a comment or a DM. Let us know what those are. We'd love to learn and hear more about how you're taking care of yourself. And then until next time, we'll see you guys. Stay true and stay on Hue.